Right, welcome along, everybody. As you'll see, we're recording today's session. Delighted to have you all here for our latest Getting Started with Professional Registration workshop with Elena Ficardi and Jill Black. I'm Sean McNamara from CILIPS Scotland. So we are running this session in the background. We've also got Kirsten McQuarrie from CILIPS, and we've got Leah Higgins as well. And so we're in the background. You do please use the chat as much as you can. If you've got any questions that come up throughout the session that you'd like us to pass on at the end, then please do just put them in the chat. There's also a Padlet that was sent in the event email, so you can post things there, but probably now, if you can, just post them in the chat and we can pick them up at the end. As I was saying just a moment ago, feel free to keep your mics off throughout, just to avoid any background noise, but please do turn them on if you do want to ask a question later. Videos can be on or off, just whatever. It's nice to see faces, but equally, I know you may have other things going on, so it's perfectly fine to keep your camera off. We have enabled captioning, so you should be able to put that on and off at the bottom. We have two PRSOs with us today, and they'll be going through a presentation. We'll have a break in the middle of that, and also we will have a golden hour at the end, which basically that is aimed at if you want to stay behind for the final hour and just purely work on your chartership as a protected time. You're more than welcome to do that, but fine if you just want to stay for the presentation parts. Okay, I think that's everything from me. So I will now pass it over to Jill. So Jill, please take it away from here. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks very much. So I'm Jill Black. As Sean said, I am one of the PRSOs for CILIPS Scotland. But we do provide the same support and the same slides throughout the country. So I believe there's quite a few folk here who are from further afield. So very much welcome to you as well. This session is aimed at anyone interested in undertaking professional registration. Whether or not you've already started, and just those who would like to know what's involved. So we're going to be going through the process, going through the support you can expect, and some tips and hints on how to submit successfully. Now, just to say, throughout these slides, we will use the term information professionals, but that is a catch-all term because we totally appreciate that there is a huge variation in roles through the librarianship and knowledge management and information management careers. We have two presenters today, but we've also got some feedback from the assessors from the most recent assessing panel, so we can cover that with you at the questions at the end as well. Excellent. Oh, just one thing. I won't be able to see the chat or if you put your hands up or anything while I'm chatting. So Kirsten's going to keep an eye on that and just break in anytime, Kirsten. Okay.
I'm giving you the thumbs up and then realised you literally just said you can't see me. But
well, I can see you strangely, so that's fine. I can still see you. You can wave hugely at me if you like. Lovely. Cool. So, the value of professional registration and why CILIP? Well, CILIP is a chartered body. So a royal charter is a recognition of our preeminence and stability and permanence within this given profession. We've been awarded the right to offer individual chartered status. You can be a chartered fellow or a chartered member of the institute. And we also provide certification. Individual chartered status imparts parity with other chartered professions. The UK Privy Council has a policy that includes criteria for all the individual chartered status over all the different professions should be broadly similar. So if you recognise a chartered accountant, a chartered engineer, chartered surveyor, you would also recognise a chartered information professional. The UK is a world leader in such professional standards, and so having a UK chartered status is advantageous at a global level. Also, and this is particularly what I felt because I work in the legal profession as opposed to within a library itself, you may be working with teams or stakeholders who do not recognise your job title or even your chosen profession, but being chartered is something that is instantly recognisable. Charters and chartered titles have traditionally been linked to academic qualifications as well. Most modern chartered bodies that award individual chartered status do so as this robust professional award. And our general professional awards, the A-CLIP, M-CLIP, and F-CLIP, not the KM variants as yet, but hopefully that will come, are also accredited by the SQA, the Scottish Qualifications Authority. Now, this provides extra external quality assurance to our professional registration. So this means that the professional registration standards have been given an SCQF equivalence and credit rating to academic qualifications for those who do not already hold these. And you can see all this on our CILIP website under credit rating for professional registration. So hopefully you'll be able to find that. So why spend this time? Why spend this investment in yourself doing this? Well, it is that. It is an investment in yourself and your career. It's about making time to develop yourself, get formal recognition for what you have achieved in the workplace. It provides a moment in time to reflect on your career and to recognize your professional expertise and skills and to consider your medium to longer term professional pathway. Now, CILIP members who have undertaken professional registration, and I count myself as one of these, I have undertaken my chartership and revalidation, and I'm working towards my KM conversion. Commented upon on how this has increased their confidence at work, because self-confidence does not always equal professional confidence, and how it's helped them successfully in attaining new professional opportunities. You develop a mindset during professional registration of evaluation and reflection on your professional practice. You can put yourself in a strong position when seeking out new opportunities. You can get well-constructed examples of your professional practice for annual appraisals or promotions, and you can become quite confident in competency-based interviews and appraisals because of the way we look at our PKSB. So, what's on offer? Well, as a charter body with right to confer this individual chartered status, CILIP offers these following awards: certification, chartership, and fellowship, and also in the field of knowledge management, chartership and fellowship. There are routes from the general chartership into the KM, which is a slightly shortened process, or you can just start and go straight for the KM chartership if that's what you wish to. The KM chartership is specifically for KM practitioners and reflects the requirement of the ISO BS standard 30401/2018, which is knowledge management systems requirement. We don't actually have any plans at the moment of KM certification. So if you're at the certification level, then this is the general, and then you would choose whether you want to go general chartership or KM. And as I alluded to earlier, once you have gained professional registration, you can choose to revalidate. Now, revalidation is not compulsory at all, but it does show that you are remaining committed to developing your professional practice within the framework of the professional registration. And any revalidation is recorded within the CILIP Register of Practitioners. And again, it is really helpful in other career activities such as your annual appraisal or the regular updating of your CV. And if you are thinking about revalidation or similar, I can highly recommend the PRSOs do courses called Revalidate in the Morning, and it's amazing how much you can do just in the space of a couple of hours if you've got focused time. Now, before you enroll, you can access the candidate's guide for each of these levels, and these are available from the public side of the CILIP web pages. These guides are absolute Bibles for anyone undertaking PR. Please read these guides and consider the criteria on which will help you decide which level that you'd like to go for and whether or not it is right for you. There is a progression between the levels. You could go certified to chartered fellow, but each does stand on its own. So if you wish to and you feel you're at the right part of your career, you could aim for fellowship right from the start. But most people, I think, on this call will either be starting at either a certified or a chartered member level. In general, certification will often suit you best if you're at the beginning of your career and you're developing your core skills. But chartership would suit you best if you are a member who has already got a body of professional experience. It does involve a greater focus on reflection and evaluation. We will be using those words so much in the next hour or so, you would not believe reflection and evaluation. Now, fellowship, as I did mention there, is the highest level of our awarding system, and it does mean that you signal a significant contribution to the profession. Now, if you are unsure as to which level you should enter at, then we would recommend looking at those downloadable guides and really considering carefully how you might meet them. If you have already downloaded those guides, incidentally, and you are embarking on your journey, please remember that those guides exist, because so many of the queries we deal with, they genuinely are all answered in those chartership guides or certification guides. It's amazing how much information is in there. Now, if you are a CILIP member, you will also have access to the e-learning hub for webinars as well. So you can look ahead at those webinars and see whether or not you think that you can meet the criteria. Okay, let's move on. So what support can you expect? Okay, the candidate guide. I keep mentioning the candidate guide. It is super important. We've got the PRSOs. That's the group that I belong to. We meet regularly. We're from all areas of the UK, and we make sure that we all have the same advice to give to people. We give advice on the process, what you need to do, how long it can take to do it, who you should contact, those kind of things. We do not, I have to say, give advice on the actual content or your actual experience. That would be more for a mentor to look at, and we'll chat about mentors in a minute. But the PRSOs, we are all about the process. There are dedicated candidate-only online groups. Now, quite a lot of the things that we'll be pointing you today are only available once you have registered. So if you're looking on the CILIP website and you haven't yet joined up to be said that you were working towards one of your professional registrations, you may think there is a lack of information, but that's because that information is in your dedicated online group for people working towards certification or people working towards chartership or fellowship. There's loads of amazing information on those resources. There's like example submissions, there's the mentor lists, all those kind of things. And there's also a forum where you can either chat between yourselves or ask questions of the PRSOs, which is quite handy. So we have professional registration events, live and recorded. Have a really good look, especially if you're in Scotland. The CILIP Scotland website has got an amazing array of information that you can look at, and there'll be a slide later on with loads of places for you to go and have a look at. Some of the past events have been recorded and are available to view online. Really have a good play about on those web pages because they are huge amounts of information for you. But we also do live seminars like this, usually 1 or 2 a month. So for upcoming live events, do go and play around on those websites. CILIP Mentors is another area of support that you can look to. Now, having a mentor during professional registration is recommended, but is not obligatory. We recognize that some people work better on their own. Some people feel that they can do it without a mentor. We'll talk more about mentors later, but just to say there is a pool of CILIP trained mentors that and you can access that list once you have registered. It's in the candidates area because it does have people's contact details on it and things like that. We can't just have it up. The mentor's role is not about the process, that's the PRSOs. They are to be more about the content of the professional development. Okay. So the process, it's fairly straightforward. I probably don't need to read it all out. But, oh, and just to let you know, we will be sending you these slides afterwards, so you'll be able to check these out. You don't need to be scribbling or taking screenshots. So you get started, you choose which level you wish to go for, you enroll online. There is a payment, and the payment details are on the CILIP website. You can choose to find a mentor. We will look in great detail, well, in a little bit of detail because we don't have a huge amount of time, at the PKSB. I should have mentioned, you do have to actually be a member of CILIP to enroll. So just to highlight that, if you are on this call and you are not actually a member yet, then you would need to be a member of CILIP once you wish to start professional registration. Cool. We'll mention mentors later. Using the PKSB. Now, the PKSB is a self-assessment tool, and it helps you plan your professional development. And that is a professional development that you will then undertake. You will then evidence that development. And then, very importantly, to a lot of people on this call, I imagine, write your evaluative statement. Now, a lot of chat will be coming later about the reflection and evaluative statement. Really important. And then you will prepare the documentation and submit it. Now, all these submission details, etc., will be in your candidate guide, which everybody, of course, will have downloaded. I keep mentioning that there is a professional registration group for the candidates. What you want to do is you want to log in to the CILIP website. You click on groups. Now, if you're in loads and loads of groups, here we go. If you're in loads and loads, I tried to scroll down, which was foolish because it's a screenshot. Then you may have to actually search professional registration. But to be honest, I can't imagine people are in that many groups. You could just scroll down. Cool. Excellent. One of the things you will find on these groups, and there is a separate group for the KM pathway, just to let you know. One of the things on these groups is the mentor list. Now, having a mentor is, as I said, not compulsory anymore, but we do advise that you have one. You do not have to choose a mentor from this mentor list. If there is somebody within your professional community that you feel is already acting as your mentor, you could approach them and ask if they will help with these regular meetings to keep your professional registration on track. But the thing about the CILIP mentor list is that these people have been through the official CILIP training courses, and they are also aware of what is involved in professional registration, and they do understand the process. We are aware that there has been a lack, well, maybe not a lack, but the number of mentors has been such that people have been finding it difficult to find one recently. If this has happened to you, please do not worry, because just even this week, there is a new training course for new mentors. And once those mentors have been through the training course, those names will be added to the list. And they will be able to take on, I think it's between 2 or 3 each. So this is a really good time to start looking for mentors. Once this week has gone through and their names are added to the list, there should be some more mentors available. What we would say is that you don't have to, in fact, it's preferable not to have a mentor who is exactly in your area of work. If you have a mentor from out with your area of work, then they can provide a little bit of distance. They can provide wider sectoral awareness. Now, that's really important for criteria 3. They can maybe even help you with setting up meetings or tours around other sectors. We provide a mentoring agreement checklist. Now, this maybe seems a bit too formal, but what it does is we do recommend using it because it will lay the groundwork of whether you and your mentor understand whether you prefer to meet in person, whether you're online, how many times a week, what time of day, sorry, probably not many times a week, many times a month, whether it's whether you want to meet in person, whether you want to meet a particular time of day, those kind of things. You probably best want to get that organized right at the start. It provides guidance on the boundaries of your relationship. That is for personal use only. We don't expect to see that. You don't need it to be included in your candidate submission, anything like that. So you don't need to be geographically close to your mentor, because if you've decided that working online is fine, and we're all much better at that these days, then that's absolutely fine. Your mentor, although we said that it's best if it's out with your particular workplace, we do appreciate that there are, in fact, some circumstances where that may not be viable. Say if you're working for a government agency or some other agency that requires confidentiality, then maybe you would wish to look for somebody that you trust within your own organization. But in general, you would really be looking to an external person for that. Your mentor is supposed to be there as a sounding board, and they could be challenging your viewpoint on things or your experiences. They can be asking you to reflect more on your experience and what you are writing down in your submission. Don't be afraid that if it doesn't work out, because you do have to trust this person and they have to be working well with you, you could just say, look, is this not working out? And look for somebody else. If you need help with doing that, do contact the member services. You could then go back to the list and try again. Now, the mentors won't be up to date with the full information about processes and guidance. So for any process queries, do send these to the PRSOs instead. And equally, the PRSOs, myself included, do not have mentor training. So we won't be able to give you advice on the type of evidence that you're collecting or the type of activity you're undertaking. So there's a wee bit of a divide there. The PRSOs for process, the mentor for more sort of guiding career pathways. Right, so this is the overview. It looks a horrible slide, this. But this is just to give you an overview of what we're asking you to do. We've got the PKSB, which we're going to look at in a minute, which is self-assessment, and it helps you organize your professional development activities. Your professional development activities will create these evidence pieces, and your evidence pieces will flow into and be cross-referenced towards your evaluative statement. You also, so these evidence pieces are your choice, that shows what you've been developing. You also have to hand in your CV, job description, and organizational aims and objectives. Now, these, although some people just sort of add these and write them off because they're like, well, everybody has to put these in. But these can double up as extra pieces of evidence. And if you annotate them cleverly with reflective statements themselves, then they can even be used to steal some of your word count that you might be struggling with. Because the thing about the evaluative statement is it is short. It is very strictly limited. I think it's only 1,000 words. I mean, it's really small. And you have to address all 3 criteria in those evaluative statements. So what you want to be doing is trying to get as much annotation into your CV, job description, and organizational aims and objectives as possible, and then cross-referring. So we'll show you where to find some evaluative statements that have passed their submissions in the future, later on here. But in general, you want to use these evidence pieces as more than just here's a picture of what we did. You want to be using them for extra words, extra reflection, and use your evaluative statement to point out to them. If you're going for fellowship, you also need to have letters of support. So the criteria. Now, this is really important because your submission has to deal equally with the 3 criteria. Now, you don't need to take notes from this slide. The full guidance to the criteria for each award is, of course, in those downloadable guides to the professional registration and on your candidates group pages. But what we have is we've got 3 different criteria which have different levels that you have to prove for the different levels of professional registration. 1, personal performance, 2, organizational context, and 3, wider professional context. Now, if we look through the different levels, you'll notice they build on each other. So in certification, it's usually identifying and undertaking, considering and examining, enhancing knowledge. By the time you get to chartership, you're applying what you've learned and reflecting on the outcomes. You're now evaluating and reflecting. You see, there's a whole load of reflection by the time you get to chartership. And with fellowship, we are looking at more substantial and significant. So these are the differences in the different levels. But it's up to you as to which area you feel that you can work towards. We do have different requirements for if you go down the KM chartership route, mostly to do with the focus and how much of your evidence and how much of your activities for development should be focusing on areas related to knowledge management. So it's fairly straightforward, and those guidelines will be in your downloadable chartership guide. Fab. So, should have been obvious from the previous screen, but the level you start at is determined by those words that we were picking out in the previous slide. So, do you have the ability to reflect and evaluate and apply your knowledge? If so, jump in at chartership. If you are just at the beginning of the process and you are starting out on your career, you may wish to start with certification. If you have this significant and substantial experience, you're heading towards fellowship. Here we go. So we are just going to have a wee look at one of the criteria just now, just to have a look at the differences as to where you might start your journey. So if we look at criteria 2 here, the organizational context, this can be, we'll just use this to see if you were unsure as to where you were going to start at. So in the organizational context, we are considering and examining. In the chartership, we are evaluating and showing your ability to implement improvement and reflecting on the actual and desired outcomes. And then in fellowship, we have evidence the substantial achievement in your practice. Now, some people feel that they have failed at the first hurdle here because some people say, well, we don't have, say, a proper organizational context here. We don't have organizational aims or objectives that we can apply our service performance against. If that is the case, you can actually draft these yourself and explain that these were not available, you have created them. And importantly, if you were, for example, aiming towards chartership, make little notes on these organizational aims, reflecting on the process of actually coming up with these organizational aims and objectives. So you can use that organizational aims and objectives that you've even created to reflect and show that you have been considering how this all fits into the wider picture of your organization. So, peacocks, yay. Um, we we just have a nice bunch of peacocks here, but that is because the keywords that we have been looking at here: identify, consider, examine, apply, evaluate, reflect. These are all at the heart of CILIPS professional registration. The activities that we are going to be asking you to do to show your development do not exist in isolation. The criteria asks you to apply your learning in practice and reflect on both the process and the outcomes. So when it comes to which evidence you need, it's the evidence of how you have met the criteria, those three criteria that we've just looked at, then you need to evidence not the activities that you did, you need to evidence your own evaluation and your own reflection. Now, this does require a bit of a different way of thinking about evidence. The evidence is not that you attended something, but instead about what you learned and what you applied in practice from attending that conference, or not a poster in itself, but what the poster has led to in your practice. Evidence in this sense is the narrative that you provide that demonstrates that you didn't just turn up, but you have learned, applied, evaluated, and reflected. Now, Elena is going to go into great detail about evidence later. Now, it is important to think of your submission smartly. It's not about throwing everything in it. Not like, I've done this, I've been to this, that, and the other. Part of your submission and part of the assessment of your submission will be an evaluation of your choices as to what you have included. So you don't just chuck in masses of stuff. You've got to make it easier for the assessors. You've got to show why this evidence is important and that it's clearly linked to one of the three criteria. In fact, it is better if it is linked to more than one of the three criteria, because then you can use one piece of evidence to cross-reference it to all over the place. And that is a really efficient way of making your evidence succinct and compelling. So, for example, if at a chartership level you developed yourself in a particular skill, you applied it in practice and you reflected upon it, on the process and on the outcome. Well, that would meet criteria 1. That's your personal development. If applying it in practice improved the service performance in relation to your organizational aims and objectives, and you reflect upon the outcome of that, then that one piece of evidence is also meeting criteria number 2. And if in developing that new skill that you then put into practice in your organization for your organizational aims and objectives, if during that process you went and talked to other professionals in other sectors to find out what they do, for example, what their best practice in a different sector is, then that would also meet criteria 3, your wider professional knowledge. So we are information professionals. We do have to use these professional skills to be deliberate and evaluative and selective in our choice of evidence. Now, let's bring it all back to these peacocks, because one of our members has coined the phrase, bring out your inner peacock. Professional registration is a reward for you as an individual. It is a recognition of your own individual professional practice. So although you are providing the evidence in the context of your organization or your service, the most important part of it is about you. What did you contribute, and what did you achieve, and what part did you play? The assessors are not benchmarking or awarding your service or your organization. They just want to know about you and your development, your professional development, what your contribution to the service has been, and about your engagement to the wider profession. So you need to put your development and contribution and engagement into the context of your organisation and the wider profession, but it should always be you that should be the focus. So apparently, it's all about being a full feathers out peacock. And this, of course, would be especially true at the fellowship level. Cool. Excellent. Where are we now? Oh, yes. Reflective writing. Now, first thing I'd like to say about reflective writing is that we do actually have entire courses about reflective writing. I think the next one is coming up in November. And I think that in Scotland, we're going to have a CILIPS Scotland one in December. So it's all about being reflective practitioner. When we hear back from the assessors, we do hear the most common reason for submissions not being accepted is they were insufficiently reflective, that they were just telling what happened and not what that meant for your development and for your evaluation. So reflective writing is required, absolutely non-negotiable. It is absolutely required for an evaluative statement and your evidence pieces. So when you're looking at your PKSB and making comments, use reflective wording. Always be thinking as a reflective practitioner. At its simplest, reflective writing is your personal reaction to the experience. So you will write it in the first person. I learned, I discovered. You'll be using I and me a lot. It's usually a bit less formal than maybe academic writing might be. And also, it's kind of best to do it as soon as you've had the experience. It's very hard to look back on training 6 months ago and think, how did that make me feel? So even if you're just making a couple of notes, just write down as soon as possible, even while you're at the session, what does this make me feel? What am I going to put into practice from this? How will this develop me? Don't try and wait a long time and catch up on you by relying on your memory. We've said here, be specific, not general. Try to give specific examples and as many of those as possible. These examples should show, however, your personal reaction or experience. Don't tell what happened, tell why, what made you feel, and how that developed you. So this activity will improve my such and such skills, knowledge of this wider professional topic means that when I contribute to a specific project next month, I will have a better understanding of how this has been put into practice in a specific external organization elsewhere. And this will increase defined outcomes that you would therefore be able to explain. So be specific. Don't just have platitudes or generalizations. Show the value of reflection. By reflection, you are emphasizing the link between what you did and learned and its usefulness in your specific area of work and in your general development. Explain with examples how it will help you in your work and an understanding how that's all interconnected with your organization and the wider context. Show practical value of whatever you're doing. So if one of your developmental activities is to read the information professional journal, then explain why that's going to be useful and what that made you feel. Now, remember the word count in the evaluative statement is very limited. So build that reflection into your evidence pieces. Build it into your PKSB comments. We are about to chat about the PKSB comments very soon. In fact, maybe now. Shall I click on? Yes. So what we're going to do is we're going to have a wee look at the PKSB and then we'll take a quick break because the PKSB is fairly full on and you will probably need a wee comfort break after it. And then once we've chatted about the PKSB, then we will have a wee break and then Elena will talk to you quite a lot more about reflection and evidence. So the PKSB, the Professional Knowledge and Skills Base, assessment tool. Sounds very upmarket. You will have access to this when you are signed into the CILIP website. It has been developed by CILIP, and it's really well thought of. Some other international library associations have even bought it from us. It's really good. So yay. It's really detailed as well, and it covers absolutely masses of skills and professional expertise that you may have to develop in whatever role. Remember, we mentioned the vast spectrum of roles that our profession can encompass. Well, there should be something for everybody in this wheel. What we are going to look at, though, is we're going to have a wee look about all these different parts and segments and colourful bits. So don't worry if it's all a little bit intimidating just now, because I'm going to look at that for you. So for professional registration, well, first of all, you can use this not just for professional registration. You will be able to use this. I always say it's not just for life, not just for PR, it's for life. You can use it for your own personal development. You can use it for appraisals, job interviews, all that kind of stuff. It's a really good tool to help you think about your own personal development. But today's all about professional registration. So we're going to look at what you need to use and need to evidence using this for PR purposes. So the first criteria in the professional registration process is identify areas of improvement in your personal performance and undertake activities to develop those skills. Now, each of these segments lists a multitude of skills underneath. We'll show you that in a second. So at the beginning of the process, this is a tool to help you identify the skills gaps or where you feel that there is an opportunity for improvement. So this is where you identify the areas which you could improve and plan your personal development activities. You can also set goals for what improvement you want to achieve. And at the very end, just before you submit, you will be asked to self-assess again to show your progress, to see if you've hit those plans and development that you intended, and use the comments boxes to reflect upon the progress and also consider future development. So it is an online tool. And if you haven't seen it before, once you're logged in, you can go to the quick links, PKSB on CILIP. There's also a link right there. So you just log in as normal. It used to be you had to have a separate login, but I think that's sorted now. Cool. So does look a bit complicated, but we're going to split it out into core principles, which are the center, ethics and values, because everything's built around ethics and values, but we're also encompassed by basically our three criteria: the personal professional development, the organization and environmental context, and the wider library and sector context. Now, when I first looked at this, I thought that that meant that this segment was all about professional development. So I thought that anything that touched the corners that had professional development were related to that, and anything that touched the corner that related to organizational environment meant that, but that is not what it is. The encircling three criteria just covers the whole of it. It's a circle, it goes around everything. So we have our core principle inside at the heart, which is ethics and values, and then encircled by the three different criteria. These principles encircle all of the skills sectors within. So professional expertise is the dark teal kind of color. These are the skills that you would probably need. These elements map the skills and behaviors that are unique to our profession. So we've got things like data management, knowledge management, information governance, research, all those things that make us part of our profession. The pale blue generic skills are to do with those more cross-sectoral skills that you could develop on many different professions like technology, planning, management, leadership, customer service. So these are still within our core principles, but they are more generic, where we have professional expertise on the top. Now, importantly, let's see if I've got my next slide up. Yes, here we go. There is quite a lot of confusion amongst the terminology. So you are not expected to self-assess yourself against all of these areas. And even within these, all of these sections, and even within these sections, you are not even supposed to self-assess against all those areas. So here, I hope you can see this, I have clicked on this sector, this nice wee section here, called research. So it's within the professional expertise and it's called research. Now, once I click into this, I get a very nice definition of what skills and professional expertise go into the research section. But then the research section is itself split into knowledge skills areas, which I've highlighted in yellow here. Always, if you are looking at this, always, there's a button here that says show more information. Always click on that because it will then give you much more detail about what we expect under each of these skills areas. So the section is the kind of segment there, the orange, the green highlighted segment. An area is the sub level between that. So we're in section 9, area 9.1, 9.2. Now, when you are doing your development activities, you are only to select 10 to 12 areas, not 10 to 12 sections. That is a huge amount. You pick the section that you feel you're most requiring development in, or you would most like to develop, and then within that, you choose 8 to 12 areas in total. So please, we have had lots of people who have tried to self-assess against every section and every area within every section. So you can pick and choose between the different sections, and within that, you can pick and choose the different areas, and you're only selecting a total of 10 to 12 areas. Now, I know I've gone on about that a lot, but we see that question come up often. So a wee bit of chat there about, oh, hold on. I'll just go back to here for a sec because I can show you a little bit extra. So you have identified an area. So say I've identified these 9.1 and 9.2. I want to say those are my two of my areas. What you do is you give yourself an initial rating. And there's a really handy button here called Show Ratings Key, which tells you what the ratings all mean. So your initial rating and your current rating, if you're doing your initial self-assessment, will be exactly the same because you're right at the beginning. Then you give yourself a target rating and a comment. Remember, if you want to be kind to yourself and the assessors, make these comments reflective. The why, the me, the I, the how does this development affect me? So the first rating and the current rating will be the same. And you select your target rating to work towards. So you've only chosen 10 to 12 of those. And if I click onto the next one just for 2 minutes, if you're doing the KM chartership and the KM fellowship, then you do have to focus this percentage onto specific areas. So 60% from the knowledge management section 6, 20% from the generic skills section 10 and 12, and 20% from the PKSB area of your choice. There's a slightly different mix for the fellowship. So if I now go on to the next one. So, here we go. So here you are starting to put ratings in. You do want, this is slightly incorrect because you would want your initial rating there as well. Your initial rating and your current rating have to be the same, and then you put your ideal rating on as well. So at the start, you will have, you can download a report. Now, the download a report button is important because you're only looking for the rated areas report. The rated areas is the one which is going to highlight any items that you, any areas that you have given an initial and current rating to. So if you download that report, it suddenly gets a lot more easy to deal with, a lot easier to read. You can always get your ratings key, and oh, now this is quite useful. See up here with the 3 extra lines. Now the 3 extra lines is where you find more information, which is really handy. If I go back, previous, I had some more information up here because I had made it slightly smaller. So I had my ratings key, my history, my help, my edit profile, and then the 3 little lines. There are missing from up there because they're all in the 3 little menu lines. So go and have a wee look in those menu lines and see what you've got. You'll probably have your download report, your help buttons, your ratings key. It's really handy. Okay. So this slide we're just going to zoom past because there was a different PKSB in the past. I am imagining that most of you will only have recognized this particular one, so you don't need to worry about the changes. If anybody's on this call that did have a previous edition of the PKSB, we would encourage you, in fact, you have to go on to the updated one. It's because the section numbers are slightly different, the area numbers, and you will not be able to be assessed on the old version anymore. Okay. Now, where we go? Okay, we're gonna, just before we go, I just want to go back to here. So the ratings key is very important. As I mentioned, the rating is only from 0 to 4. 0 is no knowledge at all. 4 is advanced knowledge. And you always look at the ratings key first. Don't get too tied up on which ratings you give yourself. The assessors are not assessing you on these ratings. They're assessing you on your development. So what you have to do is, I mean, I've got 20 odd years of experience in research, for example, and I'm still not going to be putting like initial rating 4 at the start, because where does that lead me? If I'm going to want to develop something, I'm going to have to start at a 2 or a 3 and develop up, or start at 0 and a 1 and say, I don't know anything about this, but I really want to develop, and I'll show you my current rating might be as low as 0. My target rating might only be 1, but it would give me something to work towards. But you are not being, don't worry too much about your ratings that you're giving yourself. That's not what you're being assessed on. It's the development and reflection on your development. You can use these comments boxes to take some of the word count away from your reflective statement, as long as you properly cross-refer them. You can undertake skills or choose areas that could broaden your skills base. You could just develop the skills that you use in your everyday work. The purpose and focus for using the PKSB at this time is for your achieving professional registration. So also always have in mind how to meet the 3 criteria. The assessors always wants to see the development that will underpin improvement in these 3 criteria. You're going to be looking at personal performance and organizational aims and the wider context. You're always only going to be downloading the rated areas one. Don't be downloading the full report because that'd be really complicated. You will be asked to submit a report along with your final submission, and You only have to do the second one that you do, the one just before, because your initial rating will be there, your current rating, which will hopefully have gone up, and your target rating. Now, your target rating doesn't have to match your current rating. If you started at a 0 and wanted to become a 3, but you've only become a 2, reflect on that. Use this comments as an opportunity to make more reflection and say, well, I've obviously still got work to do in this area. It's a really useful tool. It can be confusing. We do appreciate that. There is in the CILIPS Scotland training collection online a course we did in the summer, which really went into this in far too much detail, perhaps. But that's not for me to say because we did the course. So I think that is a perfect time to, I think we'll just get to the end. That's just the end of my session there. And let's see what the time is. Oh, 1 hour on the dot. Well done, me. So I'm going to leave you just now, but I'll be in the background and helping out for answering queries at the end. And just pop any questions you've got into the Padlet or into the chat. Thank you. Oh, I should say I'm going to hand back to Sean now, and he'll tell you how long the break is and when to come back, etc.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Jill. That was really informative. We have got loads of questions, so I'm thinking maybe we take a 10-minute break just now and then come back at 10 past, and then we can come to that. Jill, I've put the link of the Padlet in, and we've Kirsten's been fantastically adding all the questions that have been coming in to the Padlet. So everything we've had is on that Padlet. So if you when we do come back, if you want to have a quick look at what's come in, then please do. But yeah, we'll start back at 10 past for the final section, and then we'll come to all of the questions after both Jill and Elena have finished. So see you at 10 past, everyone. Thank you. And I'll now pass on to Elena to take on the rest. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Sean, and thank you, Kirsten. So this is now the part after Jill has explained a lot about the process of, she gave us the PKSB, a bit of more explanation, the PKSB, on the mentors, on how to start the process. Now, this is the part where you're going to find, you'll have to work a lot on this, because this is how you're going to develop yourself. So all the activities that you're going to do, and this really, there is such a wide variety of activities that you can do, from just the water cooler conversations to residential courses. Now, you're probably already doing a lot of these activities, and you're already learning a lot. So what's the important thing here is how you're going to take forward into your professional practice, and how you have applied what you've learned, and your evaluation and reflection on outcomes. So these are all, for example, we have the in-person, but we have also digital activities that you can do, from, for example, reading articles. We have a vast, a really good part of the membership, of the CILIP membership, is that you have access to professional journals. So, for example, even reading a couple of journals, for example, you want to learn more about the leadership skills, you will find some in library or in an information management context or knowledge management context. You can just go to the CILIP website and pull up an article on leadership. So, and that is already an activity that you've done. Now, the next step is to reflect on that and to write a little piece of evidence to explain why maybe you're interested in that, and also what you've learned. So that is the major thing, is that what you have learned from that activity, or have you learned, or what were your expectation as well about that activity, or the outcomes of that activity. So this is the kind of things that you'll have to do, and this is a lot. It is a lot, but again, you can do online, you can do also in person. If there are, I'm not even sure that there should be some from on the CILIP website. You should be able to see the courses that are not online, so specific to some places, certain regions and areas in the UK. So you might be able to go to in-person courses as well, or even like a TED Talk or a webinar. So again, virtual and physical learning. Now there is the range of activities is it's a lot. It's really wide. So and if you're unsure if something it's an activity or is not an activity, you can just pop us an email, and or even in the forum of the professional registration candidates, you can see there is a wee forum, and you could just pop a question there, see if that could constitute a valuable activity or not. So if you want, I don't know, we could see if to try, and you could tell us if something that you're doing is an activity, can be considered as an activity or not. Maybe pop it in the chat, and we can give a wee look later. Don't know. Then now, I think we are going to definitely do this evidence quiz, because I think it can be really helpful, and personally have used all three of these in some way. So would you include in your submission as an evidence, would you use like an attendance, a certificate of attendance, or would you include the picture of your workplace, so of your library, or would you even use an email or an email trail that you have with a customer, or even stakeholders, or your boss, or someone else? Would you use any of these three? If you want to pop it in the chat. Maybe we give 5 minutes for this. Yeah, GDPR issues, yeah. So if you're ever concerned about GDPR, I would say you can use it. You can use an email, but you have to redact the other person details. So not only the name, but the address, anything that could be identifying that person, you should be redacting it. Yeah, Leilani. Any of these, if you're able to show what has been learned and how you apply it in your professional development. The certificate, most definitely, if you can then reflect and evaluate on what you have learned. I think that we would in general use them. So the thing is that you don't need to prove that you attended, that you went on the course, but you will need to show that you have implemented something that you learned. So basically, I'll give other two minutes, and then I'll explain a bit better. Very well done. The evidence is what you learn, not necessarily the certificate or the visit itself. Yes, exactly. Yeah, the evidence is basically that you have learned, or you haven't learned even, that you have learned something, you have evaluated, and you have reflected on the outcomes. So yeah, basically, you can use any of these as long as you prove, well, that you show the assessors that you have learned, that you have evaluated, and that you have reflected. So you don't need to use any of these, but also visual, the visual help of like a picture or the certificate. It's not necessarily it's not necessary that you put it there, but it's really good as a visual aid as well for the assessors. So it's nice to have like a picture of something. The emails, yes, if you are unsure about the GDPR and you're unsure of how to redact details, then don't put it. You don't have to at all. But if you can, if you know how to use it, you're quite IT, you know your IT skills, and you know that you can do it, then you can redact, and you can make sure that you are complying to GDPR rules, then you're good to go. Okay, and you can use that. Now, just to say, as Jill said earlier, the assessors are not going to, they're assessing what you're doing. They're not judging you. They're just, they're just assessing what you're doing. Okay, so you'll have to make sure that they understand the situations, that they understand that you evaluated, that you have reflected on what you've done, that if you have learned something, then you're going to you can apply what you have learned. So yeah, we can go to the next one. Now, selecting evidence. Probably, as we were saying, you're already doing a lot. You have read many articles. You have listened to a library podcast. You have attended the CILIPS conference, and you have attended the CILIP conference. That's all great. Now, but it can be a bit messy if you don't have a plan. So this is all brilliant evidence, but if you don't have a plan on how to sort this evidence, then it might be a bit messy. So before and after undertaking a personal professional development, you really should have kind of an idea of how you might use different activities to support and evidence your statement on how you meet the 3 criteria, because everything is based on the 3 criteria. Okay, now even if you don't have fully realized your plan, and you don't have a fully formed plan since the start, it doesn't matter. As long as you have kind of an idea of how your activities might fit together to make your case for you, And because this is going to help you be smarter and more holistic in your approach, and also will help you avoid discovering gaps in your evidence at the last moment, which is something that you really don't want to do. So things that you can consider are like, have you undertaken any recent development or CPD prior to enrollment? If so, are you able to include these if it supports your meeting criteria? Or if you choose to do this, can you make the adjustments to your self-assessment ratings so that the initial rate reflects where you are, where you were before that development activity? Or you want to include recent service improvement that you have instigated or professional networking that occurred prior to the enrollment. For certification and chartership, you will also need to make sure that this is still relatively current. We were saying, I think I saw a question earlier. So at the point at which you submit, usually it should be, your evidence shouldn't be more than 2 years old. There are exceptions, but generally speaking, 99.9% of the time for certification and chartership, your evidence shouldn't be older than 2 years old. This changes for fellowship because we recognize that you might need to go further back than 2 years in order to show how you have built up a substantial achievement and significant contribution. So there are some exceptions for chartership and certification, but generally speaking, it's 2 years maximum old. Now, how any proposed development activities can work alongside goals and objectives that you need to deliver in your workplace. This can create a win-win-win for you because you have developed skills, you have put them into place, and you made your workplace goals and created evidence also for the professional registration. So there is a lot that you should be considering. But again, many things you're probably already doing. If you have in mind a certain type of career, say in information management or in archiving, or more focus on customer service, you probably already have many of the activities to support your case meeting one or more criteria. So even if you don't stick with your initial ideas or plan, you're still more likely to be in a stronger position having the plan than if you are taking a doc or magpie-like approach as you go along. So it's quite likely also that you may need to adapt and change as you go along, because the service objectives can change, and also how you fund any paid for activities may change. And also what is on offer at the point at which you wish to access training may change. So obviously we are talking about 1-2 years of work. So there are many changes that we've seen with lockdown and working from home. And so things change. We see that things change and can change quite quickly. So once you have undertaken your CPD, you need to think about selecting the evidence for your submission. Assessors are looking for quality over quantity. So remember this, and there needs to be clarity as to which criteria it is that evidence is evidencing. So you need to be selective. What can help you in selecting this? By asking yourself, does this evidence show clearly and effectively how I met the assessment criteria? Is it the best piece of evidence to show that I have met the assessment criteria? Because you might have done more activities for first criterion, but there are only like 2 or 3 that are really showing that you have met that criterion. Does this evidence include how I have applied the CPD in the workplace and my evaluation and reflection on this? Have I made clear which PKSB area this CPD aligns with? Or have I referred to it in my evaluative statement? Because is everything connected? Everything is really connected. Don't include evidence or supporting materials just in case. It has to be connected to the criterion, and then it has to be connected in the, again, tie everything in when you're writing your reflective piece, okay? Don't include evidence or supporting material that are not mentioned and referenced from your evaluative statement. Again, everything needs to be tied in together, okay? From the PKSB, from when you choose your areas in the PKSB to your reflective writing. There is really not an exact rule for how much to include, but usually 15 to 25 pieces of evidence, considering that you have chosen 10 to 12 areas in the chartership, while it's going to be around 6-ish, 6-8 pieces of evidence for areas, sorry, for the knowledge management. And if you're using something that you did as evidence for more than one criteria, you need to be clear about this. So for example, you gained a skill for personal development and also applied this in practice to improve your service in relation to organizational aims and objectives, then you could create a separate evidence piece on the same activity and implementation for each criteria. Or you could create one evidence piece on the activity and the implementation to cover both criteria. However you do this, you should ensure that there is clear evaluation and reflection for each criteria. So a clearly marked section for your evaluation and reflection for criterion 1, and a clear, for example, and a clearly marked section for your evaluation and the reflection for criterion 2. Okay, so remember that other documents that you submit, such as your CV, the job description, organizational aims and objectives, and the PKSB, if annotated, as Jill said, to show the points that you're making in your evaluative statement, can also double up as contextual evidence. So Jill was saying, do a lot of annotation on the CV, JD, PKSB, all of these extra, kind of extra, quote unquote, documents. You can use them and then use them as a reference. So you are required to provide your organizational aims. Now it's mandatory, before it wasn't. And so make sure that you use them as a context to how you consider or examine the context of your service. Annotate them to make a point referred to your in your evaluative statement. For knowledge management chartership, there is a narrower focus for personal development. So you will probably find 12, 16 pieces of evidence, including your required document like CV, job description, and organizational aims and objectives. The assessors are highly experienced, but take the role on as a volunteer. So reference clearly and specifically, so to help them navigate easily between the pieces that make up your submission, and so that I can also see that you've made your case for meeting the 3 criteria. If we go to the next slide. So you probably already know the thing like a STAR a format to create evidence. But would you like to, should we try to take a couple of minutes and consider maybe a situation at work? So I'll just go through very quickly the think like a star or framework. Will be reflecting on the situation. So is there a particular problem you're trying to resolve? Or was there a situation you found challenging at work? Task is what do you want to achieve? So if you describe the problem area, what would your ideal solution look like? The action is what steps did you take to resolve the issue or solve the problem, and why did you do it that way, and what were your feelings? The result, what happened after your actions? Did it resolve the issue? Did it work? If so, why do you think it did? And if not, why not? What could you have done differently, and what have you learned from the process? If you want to think about a recent situation you found yourself in, for example, in your workplace, you could try and break it down into a sentence each for situations, task, action, and results. Do we have time to maybe 5 minutes on this? And then I'll run quickly over the other ones. Maybe this could be very helpful for the golden hour, for those who are going to do the golden hour. I, I could keep going, and if people want to just take a wee note, and they can keep working on this during the golden hour. So this is another framework, very, very useful for when you're writing your both the evidence and the reflective writing. So you have what, so what, and now what. So, and what is the problem, or what is the issue that we're facing? Also, what happened, or what did you notice? What was everyone's reaction to the event? What positive and negative aspects do you observe? This is only for the what. Then you have the so what, and it's like, what does this mean? How do you make sense of this? How does this this event affect us? Or how it's going to affect our future? Why is this so important? And what critical questions does this information cause us to ask? Also, what emotions does the event evoke? Or how does it make us feel? What conclusions can we draw from this experience? So then we have the now what, which is the moving forward stage, which is what do we need to do to move forward? So is your action, how can we turn this event into something positive? What have you learned? How will you use the insights that you have discovered? What will you do differently the next time? What will you do the same? What hidden opportunities has this event uncovered? How can we use them for our benefit? These are really all very useful questions that you can ask when you're writing a piece of evidence and when you're going to write your reflective piece. Because you'll have, these all show that you have reflected on the situation, on that event, on that activity. This is, I probably prefer this one compared to the star, but this is just, it's very subjective, you know. You choose the framework that works for you. And take a wee note of this, because it's going to be useful if you're going to do the golden hour and for all our the other shut up and write events with CILIPS. So we could go to the next slide. Extra ideas, right? So social media is a very big thing. Twitter, or now X. We used to really like Twitter, but even Instagram, for example, CILIPS Scotland is really engaging in Instagram, so, and also Twitter. So even when you're going to an event, a conference, you can show, you can share a couple of pictures of, you don't have to be in the picture, but maybe of the place, maybe your even if there is a wee tag with your name on it, you could show, you know, the usual Instagram and social media stuff. So those are things that you could add as a wee extra for your evidence, showing that you've been there, you followed the course, or you attended the conference, or even screenshots, of a course. So they, like today, you could just take a wee screenshot and put it in your evidence for the specific activity. Other things that you could do is volunteer or join the special interest groups. There are so many available. Some might be more active than others, but they're all providing you with very good training on the specific interests, on the specific subjects, and they're really a very good source of for networking, and also to be in the know of what is happening, like courses, little meetups as well. So these are really, join a special interest group, because you're going to find also your crowd. So you're going to find your crowd probably. Also, you have like reading publications, again from the SIGs. There are so many ways, and you may be already contributing your skills via volunteering outside work. In doing so, are you gaining any fresh perspectives? So you may be a governor at a local school with responsibilities for health and safety, which allows you to practice risk assessment and risk management. Can you apply these things to your library sector? Could you apply them? Could you put them in the PKSB and see if this could work for any of the criterion? So I also, for example, aligned service examples. As a school librarian, maybe you might be building collections to support well-being or health literacy of your users. or also in public libraries. We could have the bibliotherapy, which is going quite well, or health librarians, so health information services to patients. Really, you have also another example could be as information management in a global corporate settings. You could explore the latest thinking on decolonization and classification from academic settings in order to reassess preferred terms for a global user base in a knowledge organization. So you have really many ways to get new perspectives, to network. Remember to do a lot of networking is very, very important because it's going to help you for all the three criteria, really meeting new people from other sectors helps you broaden your views on your library, on the library and information profession. Now, we don't have much time, generally speaking, not even now, but so if we can go to the next slide. So because professional registration is really an investment in your future, you should expect to have to put some time outside of work hours. But again, we don't have much time, so what we can do now, if you are time poor, we are thinking about candidates whose pockets of time may not align with when the events take place. For example, working day, early evening, or even early morning. This is true now more than ever, probably because if you are juggling work and workspace and also caring and homeschooling, obviously you're not going to have that much time to dedicate to professional development outside work. So there are, for example, coffee break ideas, like knowledge sharing through randomized coffee trials, where participants will sign up to take part and are randomly assigned to share a coffee break with another participant. And you could also try a less random version of this with fellow candidates, but they will really help to have different viewpoints at each meetup or coffee break. So you could also, for example, do reflective reading book groups where you would be reading an article or a blog post where you, so that you can then share your point of view with others and what you think you've learned from that article with others, and see if what is that you're bringing to the table, what is that the others are bringing to the table. Also, yeah, sign up for events to receive recordings like today, even if you cannot attend live. I think it's really good that you managed to do a lot of recording for our events, and you can all find a lot of past webinars in the e-learning hub within CILIP, in the CILIP website. So, and you can get all the different skills and areas just there. So you can filter the media for the specific area that you want to improve. So yeah, next one is for, I don't know how many of us are doing fellowship at the moment, but even if you're not undertaking fellowship at this time, you're thinking, oh, that's a very far thing in the future, no, it's too early at this point, or what not. This part of the discussion can also still be useful because you're thinking for the future, and it's going to involve thinking about more than individual success. It's more about contributing to your sector, contributing to the wider evolving profession. So it's a much broader work that you would have to do, but it's still, you might have something at the back of your head saying, oh, maybe it could be interesting. So these are just examples of contribution and related impact. It is most definitely not a checkbox of a list of achievements. So just think about how you might demonstrate or evidence impact. Remember that your letters of support are a required element for fellowship and can be used as evidence anyway. The contribution can include published works, presentations, committees, and working groups outside of the immediate organization, offering or sharing expertise at sector, regional, national, or international level. So who knows? Maybe you're already doing that. Who knows? So the next slide. Right, okay, so I think Jill already went through this, but to repeat what she said, we have, this is your submission. So you have to have your PKSB, you have to have the CV, JD, organizational aims, objectives, your evaluative statement, all the activities, aka the evidence pieces, and if you're doing the fellowship, also the letter of support. So the evaluative statement cannot be more than 1,000 words. 999 is okay, but 1,000, maybe more than 1,000 is not good. And it has to address all the 3 criteria for your chosen award using reflective writing. This is a very hard limit to the word count. You wouldn't believe it, but it's a very hard limit. There are no exceptions. As a tip, it's useful to structure the statement to include the text of the 3 criteria as headings. All 3 criteria must be addressed equally, which is with equal focus. The word count for each does not exceed, it doesn't need to be exactly equal, but roughly the same amount of words spent on each criteria. The evidence to support the evaluative statement, for each individual evidence pieces, you don't have a word limit. And you also must use some reflective writing techniques. When considering what evidence, how much evidence, think of quality, not over quantity. An individual piece of evidence may be used for more than 1 criteria. It's not mentioned that if it's not mentioned and referenced from the evaluative statement, do not include it. Okay, everything has to tie up together. Don't include whole reports or presentations, articles, but just select a little excerpt and add a narrative to make it meaningful and to make it a meaningful evidence piece. The PKSB self-assessment report, this is the rated areas report. You only need to submit 1 report that has initial, recurrent, and target ratings, and there has to be also a bit of comment. Although this is not assessed, Remember that the assessors are going to look at the PKSP to see the progress in your personal development. You have to include the CV for the knowledge management candidate. It must be annotated to show their experience as knowledge management practitioners. And this is especially true if the job title does not include KM. All candidates can annotate their CV to make it a piece of evidence that illustrates a point being made in their evaluative statement. The job description and role profile for the KM candidates, it must be annotated to show their role that is substantially KM1. Substantially can mean either by how much time is spent on KM activities or the level of responsibilities for KM within the organization. All candidates can annotate their job description to make it a piece of evidence that illustrates a point being made in their evaluative statement. And if you change jobs or hold more than one job, you can include a second job description. Organization and aims and objectives, they have to be included. And if the organizational ones, they are required. If they don't exist, as Jill said, you can create a similar document based on your organization's mission statement or stated annual objectives. All candidates can annotate these to effectively illustrate the organizational context for criterion 2. For fellowship, you need the letter of support. These are for fellowship and KM fellowship candidates only. The letter of support should be guidance for the guidance for the letter of support is provided in the candidate guides, and you can also choose to reference the content in these letters as evidence to your evaluative statement, but make sure to reference clearly. If we can go to the next slide. You have two options on how to submit, how to prepare the submission of your files. So option 1 is to merge all your documents into one file, use insert links or add bookmarks to create hyperlinks for referencing between your evaluative statement and the evidence that supports it. Only do this if you feel comfortable with your IT skills. Include a table of content with hyperlinks for navigation. And even if this is a single file, you should still zip it before submission. Using the convention stated, always use the convention stated in the candidate guides. The other option is to have all your content in individual files. You will need to save each document using the naming guidance given. So as you can see, it's first name underscore surname underscore CILIP membership number, etc. And you have to make it clear how you reference them in the evaluative statement for assessor. Even when you are submitting separate files, it is useful to the assessors for you to provide a table of content document. You will then need to zip these files into one zip file and name it using the convention stated in the candidate guides. Whether you choose option 1 or 2, the overall file size is 30 megabytes, which is not that much. Format everything. Candidates with a disability or neurodiversity that presents particular challenge in undertaking KM chartership or creating a submission can now submit a candidate impact statement, also known as a disability impact statement. as part of their submission. This is optional and can be used to provide assessors with extra context to candidates' development journey and submission. Just because this form is used as the submission point, please don't hesitate to contact us, to contact your PRSOs or member services at cilip.org.uk for any extra support. A submission is online and there is a fee. I think I don't want to say something that is not, we'll see later. The link to upload and pay for the fee can be found in the professional registration candidates areas. All right, okay, so these are the fees for I think it's 2021, 2022, I want to say. So for chartership, it's 75, certification is 45, and 95 for fellowship and KM fellowship. There is no charge to revalidate. In terms of the assessment process at CILIP, all submissions are assessed by a pair of assessors from the professional registration panel. If the assessors feel that the candidate has met 2 of the 3 criteria, but is very near, but not quite there yet for the 3rd criterion, then they can ask for further information. It happened a few months ago to a colleague of mine. This takes the form of an additional question focused on this criteria with a word limit of 500 words for the answer. After acknowledging receipt of this request, the candidate has 6 weeks to respond. Although in extenuating circumstances, the panel can extend this upon request. In a common scenario that a pair of assessors do not agree a result, and all panel for the professional registration panel is called, and the submission will be assessed by the all panel. Once the assessors have agreed the result, this is then ratified by the PRP. Once the result is ratified, the candidate is notified by email. So next slide, we have some contacts for CILIP. So just general contacts. Also, you can use member services at cilip.org.uk for general help and support for the professional registration. Otherwise, you can, if you have any problem with your professional registration, if you have any questions, please contact your PRSOs or your mentor if you have one. And I think we have some contacts for CILIPS. So general support is admin at cilips.org.uk. While if you want to contact the Scottish PRSOs, we have a specific email address, prso@cilips.org.uk. Okay, so I think I went a bit over. If you have any questions.
Thank you, Elena. Thank you, Jill. That was fantastic. Thank you for all that information in it. And yeah, it does seem like a lot of information, but really, when you break it down into small bits, like you have, it is digestible. And I'd encourage everyone to, to take their time over all the different parts. And it is a process that, if you break it down, can be less daunting and quite straightforward. But it's all about just following the guidance as best you can. Okay, now we have quite a few questions. Now, I know we said we'd do a golden hour at this point, but I think it might be better to go through the questions, and then whatever time we have remaining, we can do the golden hour. So I know we've got Jill and Elena still on. So we've got quite a few questions on the Padlet. So I'll try and get through as many as we can, if that's okay.
Sure. I've been trying to gather some notes as we go along, so hopefully we'll have some answers. And if we don't have answers today, we will endeavour to find out the answers for you and get back to you.
Yes, thank you. Yes, we can always share some answers in the post-event email if we need a bit more time. So yeah, just to kind of go through them as quickly as possible chronologically. First one about, do you have to be a member to retain post-nominals? Yes, the answer. I think Kirsten answered that in the chat, and that would be the case. But you can rejoin later on. But to maintain them, you do need to continue being a member of CILIP. So the next question we had was, can all your evidence be recorded in the same way? Journal entries, variety. I mean, basically, I think the question is saying, should your evidence have a real variety? Is it better to try and record it in as many different ways as possible, or can you be quite consistent with how you're recording some of it?
My take on this would be that, as Elena was pointing out, it doesn't actually matter what your evidence is or how it is presented. What matters is that it is demonstrating your reflective development. And from a personal point of view, however, do bear in mind that these assessors are reading loads of these submissions. You do want it to be a little bit easy to read, a little bit interesting, but as long as the cross references between your evaluative statement and your evidence is very clear, and that the reflection is right in their faces, that's what you're trying to show.
Thank you. So we're talking. Somebody was asking about the ratings, and so every time you do something that develops one of your chosen areas, you're supposed to change your rating? Question mark. And are you supposed to write in the comments at the start of professional registration or the end when you're about to submit? So yeah. So when do you add those comments? Is that once you've sort of re-rated yourself at the end?
I'm going to deal with this at the same time as another question which has come up, which is about having evidence from before your enrollment. Now, Elena did mention this, but it's worth repeating. So you're setting your initial level and your current level. It does say your initial level and your current level should be exactly the same. You can be a bit disingenuous with this because no one else sees it at this point. The initial ratings and your initial rated report is only for yourself. The only thing that you will be submitting is your final rated report, which is going to show your development. What you want to make sure, though, is that your initial rating is before you did any of the activities that you are showing in your development. So even if you are currently sitting here and saying, oh, I'm very good at that, but the thing that you were very good at, you only became good at because you did some really good development 6 months ago, and you're going to include that, then your initial and current rating when you start should be before that activity. And your PKSB should show that development. Yes, I've said that no one else gets to see it, but it is really much more useful to you to do this work as you go along. So do a bit of development, then go back in and re-rate yourself, add a bit to your comments, put in your early and regular reflective comments. Remember, reflect early, reflect often, and then you will see your development. It'd be much easier if you do it as you go along and you don't just try and fill it all in at the end when you have to provide this final rated report, because that will be almost impossible.
Thank you. So, how long does the process take on average? I mean, I know that can be quite varied. I think some people take about a year. Would probably be the least you could do it in.
I would say a year is about the very least. I think you should be aiming for between a year and 2 years. It will depend on how quickly it takes you to undertake this development. If you've not submitted within 3 years of enrolling, I believe that membership services will get back in touch with you and ask if you want to continue. But they have asked us to say at that point, they won't ask you to pay another re-enrollment fee or anything. They're just sort of nudging you along.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a similar time question. How long should you expect to wait to hear about your?
Now, this has been very high on the agenda recently. We have had a bit of feedback from the assessors because they had a meeting last week and then they reported back to us. They appreciate that they have been quite short-staffed on assessors recently. And what has been happening is that there's been quite a delay between you putting in your submission and hearing back. but not for everyone. Because what's been happening recently is that it has been going to these quarterly meetings for assessment, and everyone's been agreeing on the assessment and then reporting back to the candidate. So it depended very much on where you fell in that quarterly meeting schedule as to when your results would come back to you. They have recently recruited a whole bunch of new assessors, and they are going through an induction process right now where they're shadowing and mentoring to get these new assessors into the role. So they are saying that the timescales should actually improve going forward.
Fantastic.
But it really depends on when you fall into this quarterly meeting schedule.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. So another question asked about student membership. What if you're doing professional registration and working while studying? And you know, I as far as I know, there wouldn't be a problem with that. Obviously, if you were just a student at the time and not working, it would be quite difficult to gather the. But if you are working, you should still be able to
I have been doing a wee bit of research into this while we've been on the call, and it does say on the website that you do need to be working in a relevant role in order to work towards chartership. So I think if you were, we'll have to get, this is one of those ones that we will have to get confirmation back on, but I think maybe student membership while you're working would be all right for certification, but we will have to check into whether or not it's okay for chartership.
Okay, that's great. The next question was about the ratings, and I think we've covered that to some extent. But do let us know in the comments if anyone feels they need a bit more on that. How is chartership impacted if you change jobs content before you're ready to submit? You know, that shouldn't be too much of a problem, is it usually?
No, and in fact, it happens quite regularly. And as Elena pointed out, you can, in fact, you should submit both your job descriptions if you have changed. If you are talking about the development, or if you're referring to your job description or the service aims and requirements within your evaluative statement, just make sure that you have all the relevant pieces of evidence.
Yeah, and
there was also a question about whether or not you could be unemployed at the time. Now, that's another thing we are going to check on, because it does state on the website that you would need to be employed in a relevant role for chartership. So we are going to check on that. But a period of unemployment during the process should not impact your ability to submit at the end of the process, because during that period of unemployment, you will still be able to do development activities required towards criteria 3 and 1, which is your own personal development and your wider context of the more general profession, especially those types of activity that Elena said, which don't cost money, like social media or listening to podcasts or volunteering or going on library tours of other libraries and other professions. So if you are looking at a 2-year period and you did have a period of unemployment within that, then you could still do some development and also bring that into your reflective practices during your state evaluative statement. So I don't think that should have too much of an effect. We will look into what happens if you are currently unemployed when you wish to submit, though.
Yeah, we'll check that. Somebody else asked, you know, they've had a varied career, you know, in research and outreach and engagement, but don't have an information or records management masters. And they're asking, would CILIP membership followed by certification or chartership, and then using the PKSB be enough to apply for librarian positions? You know, from our point of view, yeah, the criteria that is asked for in library positions can vary quite dramatically from position to position. It'll certainly help. You know, there's a lot of positions that will say desirable would be to have a library qualification. We at CILIPS normally say that a library qualification can be a postgrad or master's or certification in chartership. So certainly as far as what we recognise a library qualification to be would be that, but it does depend on the employer. But it would certainly add a string to your bow. It's rarely that it's an essential criteria, but it is in some jobs. Does that sound like good advice, Jill?
The other thing to mention is that if you have chartership or certification, you already will have credits towards some postgraduate degrees and diplomas. So I think we mentioned that earlier. It's on the website as to academic ratings or credits. And it can, if you were then considering to going back and doing some sort of postgrad, then you'd be halfway there.
Great, thank you. Yeah, the question about the mental list, we'll come back to that because I know Kirsten's maybe going to do a screen share just to show where to find the mental list shortly. Question for similar for archiving. Now, we don't have a specific chartership for archiving in the same way we do for knowledge management, but there may be elements of the management one.
Well, I did a wee bit of looking into this as well. The whole of section 8 on the PKSB is all about records management and archiving, and there are 9 sub areas in there, 9 areas in the record management and archiving section of the PKSB. So actually archiving and archivists should be totally covered by the general chartership in any event. The other thing I really wanted to highlight, if you are in a very niche area where you're having difficulty finding areas of the PKSB that you feel relevant to your post, I should have mentioned is that center, the center area, which is called ethics and values, that is absolutely one of the areas that you can choose to make up to your 10 to 12 PKSB areas. Now, that's really useful, especially for criteria 3, which is the wider professional context, because if you are looking at ethics and values of, say, LGBTQ plus rights or the menopause in the workplace, that wouldn't be particularly relevant just to one particular area, the sector that you're in. That could be relevant to the much wider professional context. And so looking at something like that can really develop out if you are in quite of a, if you're looking at the other areas and you're thinking these don't really affect me, then you could try picking on the ones that really do in the professional area. Don't forget the generics ones as well, the IT, the management, all those kind of things. So if you are in an area like archiving, I totally think that the general chartership or certification would still be applicable for you.
Thanks, Jill. One of the slightly trickier questions I think for us to answer is around the recognition or transfer of professional recognition to other territories outside the UK. A little bit of a complex one, this one, isn't it, Jill? But we are looking at.
Yeah, well, what we've got here is that CILIP does have reciprocal international recognition agreement with other library associations across various overseas territories. These are mainly to do with the international academic qualifications that CILIP has recognised, but it is widely seen that the CILIP chartership is recognised internationally as like the gold standard of professional registration. So we haven't identified any like for like immediately transferable to another professional registration scheme abroad. If you are wishing to transfer a registration like your chartership or a certification like for like, then what we would do is we'd recommend that you contact the Library Association of that overseas territory. But because CILIP chartership and certification and fellowship is such a gold standard of professional registration, it is globally recognizable and recognized. So on a CV would be highly illustrative of your skills and experiences, even if they didn't have such a similar certification for their library association abroad. So it is recognized, it is highly thought of, but when it comes to this word transferable, that would be more, we'd think that you should talk to whichever organisation that you're aiming to get a professional registration with them.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. A few more questions. Thanks for this, Jill. So if the assessors say this submission was unsuccessful, what would you advise somebody to do next in that situation?
Well, the first thing to say is, before you get to that point, if your guys are still you haven't quite submitted, the main feedback we get from assessors is on the unsuccessful ones, it's mostly to do with people not reflecting enough. If people are too descriptive and not putting in the reflective evaluation, that's what mainly people fall down on. The other thing that people might fall down on is not looking at all three of the criteria: the personal, the organizational, and then the wider context. There are some examples on the candidates groups of good, well placed out submissions. And if you have a look at those, you want to be making it as easy for the assessors as possible to pass you. Now, the first step that they will do, if you were very close, is they might send you back a request for further information. And again, that is usually more reflection on a particular area. It's not a full resubmission, and they'll give you a small word count, and it's usually maybe you haven't done enough reflection on criteria 3, for example, and you have to do a wee bit of writing on that. If fully unsuccessful, you will need to resubmit your portfolio, and you will need to pay the submission fee again, but you don't need to re-enroll. So that's one fee that you don't have to pay. The intention is that a different set of assessors will see your resubmission. Now, currently there is a very small group. So if you were in, for example, a conflict of interest, for example, if somebody had already been a mentor to one of the candidates, or if they knew them or worked with them, then that might not be possible. But the intention is different assessors will look at the resubmission, and they will have given you feedback. They will have given you feedback on why it wasn't successful in the first place, so that you can work towards a better submission in the future. But as I say, time and time again, we hear too descriptive, not sufficiently reflective.
Great, thank you. There was a question about does it start from the point where you begin? And I think we covered that. I think you can maybe go back a year or two if it feels relevant enough, but really probably not anything further than that.
Yeah, and just do that little bit of wizardry with your current ratings to pretend that your current ratings were before you did those activities.
Yeah. And do all 10, 12 areas have to be from the same section? We covered that as well.
Absolutely not.
Absolutely not. It can definitely be from different areas. Are links to digital evidence acceptable evidence? For example, if created a library social media presence, could we offer the account itself as evidence? And I think absolutely it could be evidence, but it's more about the reflection, isn't it? It's about showing that and then how you reflect on it.
So in that situation, what you might want to do is as you say, the existence of the account is not evidence as such, but you might write a reflective paragraph about what it had taught you or how it had developed you. And then that could be your evidence, and say, this is the evidence relating to having a social media account. And obviously you would include the link to that social media account within that evidence.
Absolutely. So we've got a couple of questions left, so we'll just go through them. If we've missed any questions, I'm sorry, do email us or the PRSO address, and we will deal with them separately. Someone also asked, although we're selecting 10 to 12, is it worth doing initial ratings over all skills, or do you think it's probably better to just focus on 10 to 12?
Now, as I mentioned before, it is wonderful to use the PKSB as a more general career development tool. But while you are in the midst of the process of professional registration, it is actually better for you just to focus on those 10 to 12 because of the ability to do the rated areas report. Because anytime you put a rating on any area, that will turn up in your rated areas report, and it will just confuse the assessors. There will be loads of areas there that you weren't providing evidence for, you weren't doing reflective comments on, and that would just be a mess. So make it easier on the assessors, only have the evidenced areas in your ratings report. Do use your PKSB as a more general tool once your PR journey is over. If, however, you have rated a whole bunch of things and you're like, oh, I don't want these on my rated areas report, you can at any point go back in and just set them all to 0 and delete the comments. And that will then not show up.
I think there is a report that you can download on where you have developed.
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah.
yeah,
So you could do it instead of your rated areas, you could do a development areas.
yeah,
right?
kind of development. So it will consider only the ones, the areas that you have where you have progressed or where
Oh,
you
right.
have
Okay.
made something. So yeah, I think it's the development record I want to say, but I'm not sure, not 100%. Sorry.
Okay. So
But,
maybe test that out a wee bit and see if you can,
mhm.
if you do want to use it as a more general tool, then you could have, as long as you don't develop any of your rated areas, the non-evidenced areas, then maybe that would work.
Thank you. Just so two final ones. So first one, I'm a bit confused about how the PKSB comes into the evaluative statement and the evidence. Within both, are you referring to the areas you're focusing on within the PKSB tool or within the assessment criteria?
Okay. Yes, that is. I'm trying to. I tell you what, I'll try and do is I'll try and bring up one of my favorite um example submissions. That's what I'll do because I think it really chartership evaluative statement 2, is it? And once I found it, I will share my screen. Well, please don't have to say that they've taken it off. That would be very saddening. Oh, here we are. This is lovely. Okay, so I'm going to try and share my screen. Here we are. Share. I'm going to try and make it bigger. Can I make it bigger? Ooh. Yay, excellent. Can everybody see an example of an evaluative statement? Awesome. So what we are looking at here is we've got criteria and we've got areas. Now, the assessors are, you have to show that you have looked at all the criteria. So the criteria are criteria 1, personal performance, criteria 2, organizational context, and criteria 3, wider professional context. But within that, you have been looking at these 10 to 12 areas of the PKSB that you wish to develop. So the person here has listed out, done a whole section on criteria 1, then moved on to a whole section on criteria 2 and a whole section on criteria 3. And that immediately puts the assessors at ease because they can say, right, this person knows they have to look at all 3 of these criteria and it looks fairly equal. They've given equal time and space to each of these. Now, this is where the different PKSB areas come in. To show that you have thought about criteria 1, 2, and 3, it is the activities and development that you have chosen to do with the areas that you have selected in the PKSB. So in the PKSB, they have obviously decided, I need to look at 9.1 leadership skills. And I think my activities and my development in here show that I have reflected on and developed criteria 1. And they've shown which areas they've looked at under which criteria. And I think you'll find as well, this is a lovely example of 12.4, 12. You can have more than one. So you can have more than one. Oh yes, there's the example. That's it. In here, 3.2, they've got the what's that called? They've got the cross-referencing to where their evidence is. So they haven't wasted lots of time saying, go and look at this, that, and the other. They've just put the cross-referencing in and you could have more than one piece of evidence for different criteria. So they could say instead of 3.6 here, it could be 2.1, and they could be referring back to another piece of evidence here. So yes, you are looking at both the 3 criteria and the 10 areas on the PKSB, but you are using your areas to show that you've thought about each of the 3 criteria. Does that make sense? Okay.
Thank you. And then just a final question, and then I'll pass over to Kirsten to just show some of the ways of accessing these sample submissions and the mentor list. How wide does the wider context need to be? For example, as a public school librarian, does this extend to, as a school librarian, does this extend to other school libraries, libraries in general, or does it need to go even further into information professionals in general?
I'd say it would need to go a wee bit further than just a different part of your own sector, because again, that's one of the areas that we are told that people fall down on in unsuccessful submissions, that they have not given sufficient thought to the wider professional context. Just showing that you appreciate what issues affect other sectors in the profession, I think, is really important.
Thank you very much. Okay, so thank you, Jill and Elena. That was fantastic. So I really appreciate just how much detail, and thank you to everyone for their questions. And as we said at the end, our inboxes are open if you have any further questions. Kirsten, now you were going to just show a bit about how to access some of these resources online.
Yeah, absolutely. So as you all know, we were going to kind of do a full golden hour of independent work, but I think whether we might get a golden 10 minutes before the afternoon's out. But what I'll do now is actually share my own candidate area, share my own CILIP profile, within reason, of course, and give you a glimpse of exactly where you're going to find all these resources, including that integral chartership certification fellowship guide that is going to be your Bible throughout this process. So bear with me one moment where I share my screen. And hopefully you can all see now, this is the, whereas it is for us to direct you away from the CILIP Scotland site, this is where you will be going for the bulk of these resources. So as you can see, just cilip.org.uk. I'm already logged in. You see where it says sign out? When you first go in here, it will be sign in. Now, as a CILIP member, you should already have your login details. If you've forgotten your password, anything like that, there's a link to reset it. But once you are successfully signed in, you then have, firstly, you have all these options. So you can see if you were sending the membership link to somebody else, it's just realms of so much information for professional development and info about professional registration here. But what I'm going to particularly highlight for you, this is if you have already signed up, you're already a member, you're already signed up for professional registration, this is where we go. So I'm going to go into my profile. And here you can see, if you haven't encountered this already, this is where the member directory is. You can see some of us post more frequently than others here. What I'm particularly like to highlight is firstly this tab here called groups. So it's the second on the right. I'm going to click groups. This is where you can access all the groups that you are part of as a CILIP member. So you can see I'm part of our CILIP Scotland group, of course, of our LGBT network. And the integral one for today is the candidates area for professional registration. So there's one candidates area at this point for everyone, whether you're undertaking certification, chartership, fellowship, revalidation. I've got 1,400 members in there, so you can imagine where. So this is where the wonderful, the Chartership Bible is here. So we have our Welsh language editions. We also have the guide for certification and for fellowship. But just let me show you, this is the Chartership Guide. So all 23 pages of essential information. What you want to do is you want to download this, you want to bookmark it. This is what you'll be referring back and forth to. And you can see really what Jill and Elena have highlighted so fantastically for us today. Selecting your evidence, we've got tips about that. And submissions, so the practical information about submissions. And then here are our assessment criteria in detail, just as we saw in the earlier slide. So we've got personal performance, organisational context, and wider professional context. So even here, we can see evidence beyond your workplace and sector, understanding of the wider profession. And here are some recommendations for how you would do that. So professional reading of journals, books, blogs, job shadowing experiences, involvement in our groups and our regional member network, attendance at conferences and events, not to always to our own horn with our CILIPS annual conference, but there you will see all the sectors across the profession coming together. So this is a sort of evidence that annotated notes, for example, that we want to see as part of the portfolio for wider professional context. So make sure that you bookmark that, and we'll just go back. So again, you're logged in, you're going to my profile, you're going to groups, the professional registration candidates area, and then down here is where you find that guide. And you can also see you may wish to attend a Getting Started on Professional Registration webinar. So you can tick that off your list. And in fact, if you want to be really meta, you could even annotate some notes and reflect on what the process of attending today has been like. I feel like the assessors would be very much on board with that. You can also get a link to the PKSB here, and you can also access that at various bits. In fact, if you go into quick links and PKSB, it's also always available for you there. But the final thing that I will have, of course, before I do that, candidate impact assessment. So if for disabled or neurodiverse members, if you want to submit a disability impact statement or candidate impact statement, this is where you access that again as part of this group. And further useful links, we have mentioned a few. We have our forum, so ask a PRSO. Of course, please also do feel free to use the email addresses that we shared today. Example submissions. This is what Jill was highlighting, that particularly beautiful one there. This is absolutely invaluable in here because you can get, if you are undertaking certification, undertaking chartership, what does an evaluative statement look like, I hear you ask? Well, you just click here and here is a sample. Now, there's a number of samples. There's not one size fits all. Of course, we're all undertaking personal development. That's what it's called. So they are going to all be unique. But again, here's that gorgeous example that Jill shared. So really, really great inspiration there. I think I've lost this. There we go. That's us back. And if I go to the previous page and scroll up, under your mentor, this is where we're going to find, so I won't bring up the mentor list here for data protection, which we've already discussed, but once you're logged in, once you're registered in this candidates area, you click on your mentor and you're able to access the most updated mentor list. And then of course we have our mentor checklist form, our mentor completion form, which we will do as part of your submission if you choose to work with a mentor, and you can include that as part of your evidence as well. So I'll stop sharing because I can see we've maybe got one question. Oh, great. Thank you, Sean and Leah. So yeah, Mohammed, we'll send you, you'll be able to see that, and we will share this recording as well once we're finished. Oh, now, so I see somebody's put a comment that you don't see your mentor in your groups page. Is that you don't see the button? So have you got the professional registrations candidates group page? And it's actually then one of the buttons once you scroll a wee bit further down. So if you go into that candidates group and then right to the bottom, there should be a little tab that has your mentor. But what we can do actually, I think this might be a nice time to do a little trial of a golden 10 minutes. Shall we go for that, Sean? So many of you know that here at CILIPS Scotland, now this is inspired by our wonderful West branch who do regular chartership cafes, but this is our online version. So once a month, usually it's the last Thursday of the month, for an hour and a half, it's a kind of friendly, informal space, much like this. We'll begin by sharing where we are in the process, what we're planning to focus on, and then the bulk of the time is cameras off, mics off. We will work on our individual portfolios, work on our PKSB, work on our evaluative statement, wherever we are. It's really a space to hold each other accountable in a friendly way and carve out the time that's necessary for a portfolio. It's one of the frustrations that very often those who are doing the most amazing work that deserves to be showcased, it's hard to find that hour to devote to this work. So that is where we hope our power-ups can help. So that is what we are going to be doing for the next, we have 20 minutes left. Of course, if anyone has to nip off, thank you so much for joining us. We will share the recording as soon as it's ready, but if you can stay, let's just take, so I think we're perhaps a slightly too big group to introduce ourselves individually. If anyone does want to pop in the chat what they're planning to do with in the next 10-15 minutes, then please do so. Otherwise, I will pause the recording. We'll be cameras off and mics off until 3:55. I will be here throughout, so please keep posting in the chat. Don't come off mute just so that we don't disturb anyone who's got their head down, who's concentrating. But yes, we will all be here alone together, working on our individual pieces of work. And yes, then we'll come together just before 4 o'clock to see how we've got on. So if anybody does want another kind of preview of how you access resources, we'll set up a little breakout room, but I will pause the recording for now, and we will see everybody back after a golden quarter hour at 3:55. Thanks, everyone.